Jim Lowe, Associate Professor, College of Veterinary Medicine.
What do we know about African swine fever?
So ASF is a virus, Todd, that is 100% fatal to pigs. We don't know that there's a vaccine. That virus originated in Africa and really about 10 years ago moved to Europe and is now moving around Europe and recently has been introduced into China.
So tell me about what's happened in Europe so far, and then we'll catch China and see what we understand about it so far.
So the virus is interesting because it survives outside the host really well, and so in meat and meat products or tissue, it lives. So we think the virus was brought to Europe from Africa in some meat. We don't really know for sure, but that's the most likely explanation. About 10 years ago, it was introduced into the wild boar population in Africa, in Europe. And it's circulated particularly in Eastern Europe, starting in Russia. It's endemic in Russia today, and then it's moved into Eastern Europe over time here. It has moved to really in last year to Romania, both in wild boars, and now has gotten into the commercial pig population. And there's a major outbreak in Romania. There was some in Poland, mostly in wild boars, but now the major outbreak is in Romania. And here in the last 10 days, it's moved to Belgium as well. And if you remember your European geography, that's a long way from Romania. So real questions about how that virus is moving around in Europe.
Any treatment for it?
No, we can't vaccinate against it, and there's no treatment. It's a virus, and so the strategy's been to stomp it out when it gets in there, and obviously they've not been very successful. And in Europe, the problem is wild boars because those creatures live in the woods, right? And so once it's in that population, it can persist there for a really long time. Yeah,
and by stomp it out, you mean kill everything.
Yeah, eradicate the
kill clean.
That's right, eradicate the disease. So we'd identify the infected farm, typically draw a ring around it, euthanize the animals inside the immediate ring in that herd, and then quarantine and test around that. That works for diseases that are primarily pig-to-pig transmission without this meat component. But with the people and meat component, particularly in Romania, and I was on the phone to Romania this morning, it's very clear that government practices in terms of killing animals that are infected. In Romania, it's really common for people to only have a pig or two. That's really a subsistence thing. It's a major source of their protein. And so when that pig looks like it's infected, they'll go ahead and slaughter those pigs and put it into meat, then give that to friends or move that meat around the country. And so they've been very ineffective at controlling it if you just look at the outbreak over the last 8 or 9 months.
No concern about transmission to humans.
No concern to it's only a pig virus, so not pigs, not humans, not sheep or cattle or anything, excuse me.
So how are the pigs getting it? Say, you move the meat, and I've heard this from China, 1,000 miles. In a meat product, how does it transmit back to a pig?
So with garbage feeding, where we feed food scraps, and so if I've only got a couple of pigs, as we've done throughout history, human food scraps become the source of food for the pigs. And so as we get that route of transmission, garbage being fed back to the pigs, we're transmitting the virus and infected meat scraps that end up in the food waste.
Is it highly contagious or just kind of contagious?
So the good news is it takes a big dose, so it's not very contagious, but it lives outside the host for a long time. And there's a tremendous amount of virus in meat, in the muscle tissue itself. So if we move a few ounces of meat into another spot and some of that ends up in the garbage and the pigs eat it, it's almost always infectious. So it doesn't blow in the air. It's not easy to move it with physical contact. But mosquitoes that transmit blood, biting flies that transmit blood, and then meat products appear to be the kind of primary route of transmission of the virus moving around.
How worried should producers in the United States be about it? They don't seem to be yet.
Probably really scared, although we don't know what to do about it. It's certainly the hot topic of conversation when I talk to producers and other veterinarians here in the U.S. The big fear, I think, on our side is, we remember PEDV not that long ago. We've done some work, and they believe that virus came in on feed ingredients, probably soybean meal from China. There is a major outbreak of ASF in China today. They've reported 8 or 9 herds, but that's probably a gross underrepresentation of what's going on. The virus is relatively difficult to detect, and again, a lot of really small individual stakeholders in China. So we've brought one disease from China relatively recently. Well, you'd hate to think about that again. And then number 2, if we go look at the volume of meat confiscated international ports, so we've got Chicago O'Hare here, not very far. If you see those pictures, the amount of food that's confiscated every day that's illegally brought in the United States, it's hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds a day of food that the food dogs find, and so that's confiscated. So I think that's, if we just had to sit back, that's our big risk, that the industry could be on the ball, but we've got a lot of other ways to introduce this virus into the country.